that, most college majors, when you study, there's a very high percentage of people who major in something in college end up doing something completely different. I'm one of them. It's really about allowing. That's how Abraham puts it. It's just about allowing. It's just having a knowing. A knowing means there's a banishment of all doubt. One of the keys to higher awareness, banishing the doubt. Just letting go of that and just allowing it to flow, that there's an opportunity. I was telling my daughter, the one I spoke about earlier, who's had addiction issues and so on, who's trying to just get herself back after this program and get a job. And she said, it's just so hard to get a job. I said, if you just look around, I said, just look around at, within a mile of where you are. And and the next day she called me back and she said, Dad, she said, I got a job. I said, what are you doing? She said, I'm working at a motel. I said, what are you doing in the motel? She said, whatever it is that they want me to. I just walked in there and said, you know what? I just went through this program, and I would just like to do something, like anything at all that I can do. And all of a sudden, she's carrying around keys. This is her second day on the job, and she's only getting paid a minimum wage. It doesn't make any difference what she's being paid. The idea is that there are opportunities in every single moment of our life, but if you're filling your mind with it can't happen, it's not for me, this is a tough economy, things are going bad. If this is the way that you think, it's like, what is the slogan that I'm probably best known for? When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. It's a quantum truth. You just change the way you look at it all and say, you walk into a McDonald's and you're working at the French fry machine, and the person that I'm talking about being is thinking, how am I going to own this place? I got to learn French fries first, and then I got to learn how to grill the hamburger, and then I got to learn it all. So I'll just learn all of that, and then I'm going to figure out a way to own this place. And this is how they're thinking. Their mind is constructed that way, instead of looking at the things as wrong, and I can't do it, and it's not possible, and I don't have any opportunities. There are opportunities in every moment. I could go for 2 hours and tell you how the very first book how Your Erroneous Zones got published. In 2 minutes, I can tell you that I was given an appointment I took the manuscript that I had written in 1974, that I told you about earlier, and took it to my agent, Artie Pine, had arranged for me to have a meeting with a man named Paul Fargus at T.Y. Kroll Company in New York City. And I went there, and Paul was so depressed and so upset, and he was just broken down. And I was a therapist. I had a practice there, and I said, I was there to have him see if he would be willing to publish my book. So it was supposed to be about me. And this man was, you could just see, and I forgot about the manuscript, and I spent 3 hours counseling him and talking to him and telling him, because the night before his wife had said she wanted a divorce, and they had 2 children, and he was just so broken up he just didn't know if he could even make it. And we talked for a long time. He became one of my best friends, and I talked to him and helped him through that whole process. And my agent called me after the meeting. He said, so, how did it go? How was your meeting? Are we going to get this book published? You think they'll publish it? And I said, forgot to talk about the book. Never mentioned it. He was so angry at me. It was the only time he was really angry at me. He said, do you know what it took for me to get this appointment for you? You're a nobody. Nobody even knows who you are. And you're not talking about the book. You've just blown the biggest opportunity you ever had. And that same evening, Paul called Artie and told him, I don't care what his book's about, I want to publish his book. It's a true story, true story. So it's like, when you forget about yourself, I mean, what's the lesson in that? When you let go of what's in it for me, and the mantra of the ego is, what's in it for me? How much more can I get? What about me? How about me? I want some more. The mantra of the higher self is, how may I serve? What may I do for you? And when you do that, everything shows up for you. That's when you follow your excitement. And when your excitement, what did I say yesterday? When you follow your excitement, you will be supported, and it will be effortless.
because you are now aligned with God. That's what God is, your excitement. What excites you? And what excited me in that moment, back in 1975, when I had that meeting with Paul, what excited me was what excited me every day when I had my practice and my patients would come in and I would talk to them, is helping somebody to get over what seems like a trauma that is just irresolvable.
The stewardess was standing there and she said, "Oh, no. Oh, no." She knew who I was. I had been talking to her. She said, this is what I dread. I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "There's 176 people on this plane. Every one of them is going to say something nasty to me when they get off the plane. They're going to blame me, they're going to blame the airline, and they're going to..." I said, "But you don't have to let that in." She said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, you've got 2 packages, 2 suits that are protecting you from anybody coming to you with that disharmony." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you got your uniform." I said, "That's one package, and that's over the other package, which is your body, and then both of those are protecting or covering who you really are, which is how you choose to process all of this and how you choose to think and who you really are." I said, each person that comes up by you and says something negative or nasty, you can just let that only be a message to your uniform, to your package. That's not me, and you can remind yourself, they're not talking to me. They can't get to me with that stuff. They can't have that. I don't let anybody come to me unless they come with love or harmony to who I really am. So you can just say, "Well, I'm very sorry," and have a good... And it's like, and you say, "Well, they didn't get to me, and they didn't get to me. They're not reaching me with that." And sure enough, she stood there and she watched as 176 people got off, and I'd say 150 of them said something nasty to her on the way out. And each time she just sort of smiled and said, "Yes, well, it'll be 2 hours." And she gave them instructions on where to go. And when it was all done, she sat down next to me. She said, "That was fantastic. It's the first time that we've ever had a circumstance like this where I didn't let it bother me." I said, "You don't have to let that stuff into your life." And it's just like in the meditation in the field. When those thoughts start impinging on the field, the pastel that you have created, you don't have to let them in. They bounce. I do it all the time. When I'm driving, and if anybody gives me... I don't take any of that inside. I just say, "Oh, that's them, and that's how they're reacting to my form." Having a quiet mind, in a practical sense, is really understanding that what I'm talking about is not just for discussion. It's for application. If you're the kind of person who has your mind filled with 10 different things that you have to do, and that is producing anxiety, stress, ulcers, colds, backaches, headaches, cramps, runny noses, all of the kinds of physical reactions and manifestations of that kind of thinking, then you have to look at, how can you just get a blank mind, or how can you get a quiet mind? How can you just understand that, supposing you're thinking about, you got to get to work, you've got this report you got to get out, you got to get your taxes done, you got to stop and get some diapers on the way home, now the kids need to have bananas, and they've got dance lessons I've got to get them to, an endless catalog of activities. By using your mind to do that, and to occupy it all the time, none of that is going to get done. See, all of that is going to get done. Regardless, if you're the kind of person who does those things, it's going to get done. The question is, how do you use your present moments? See, anytime you use up your present moment, or anytime that you are thinking anxious thoughts, you're denying the present. You're using up the present moment instead of using it up in a productive, peaceful, serene, calm way. You are somehow believing that you can't get through this day or this moment any other way, that if I don't think about it and worry about it and be anxious about it. But the fact is, it's going to get done. Your taxes are going to get done. You're not going to jail. You're not the kind of person who's going to opt to just simply not do your taxes. You're going to get the diapers. You're going to get the report done. All of that you're going to get done. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in the position that you're in. You would be doing something else, all right? So if you know that it's going to get done, the question is, what's the most efficient and effective and peaceful way to get things done? I use the analogy often of when you're in a hurry, like when your body is in a hurry. That's when you're least effective. And that's when you always drop something. You'll drop the keys, and then you'll start sweating. And then when you start sweating, you find yourself getting more upset. You'll forget something. And you'll walk out the door, and you'll slam the door, and you left the key on the inside. Now you don't have a key. I've talked about when you take a shower. If you rush through a shower because you only have 5 minutes to take a shower, and you finish and you take your shower and then you dry yourself off, you didn't need to take a shower because you're already dirty again. I mean, you're already sweating. You can take the same 5 minutes and take a shower, if that's all you have. And you can do it peacefully. The same 5 minutes. You can push all of the other stuff out, and you can just relax. And if you've got 3 minutes, instead of rushing through it, you can just let the water pour. You can experience the water. You can wash your body. You can dry it all off. And when you finish, you're not sweating. And you had the same amount of time. The nervousness and all of that comes from the way that you decide to process. Now, in the physical world, you understand that if you hurry and rush and are filled with 1,000 different activities, that you have decreased your efficiency. Why isn't the same thing true in the mental world, in your mind? If you are filling your mind with all of the things that you have to do, and you're worried about all of those things and get yourself all consumed with them, then you're still going to be less efficient, less effective, and you're still going to be cluttered. At a moment like that, you put on a tape. If you're going to drive, you got to drive. You can't get the bananas and the diapers and the report done and the IRS taken care of in the car on the freeway. You can't do that then. You're driving. So why not be here now, as Ram Dass says. Be here now. Here's some music. Put on a tape. Meditate right there. Don't close your eyes. But just like push it all out. All of that's going to get handled. But meantime, I'm going to enjoy this. My ride from my home to my office is 17 miles. I love those 17 miles. There's a million things to see in those 17 miles. I cannot write my books or get my speeches. I can't do any of that in that time. But I can enjoy all of that. I can be there with it. I can open the windows and I can let the wind blow on me and I can experience that and enjoy all of that. And when I get to where I'm going, if I've got to get the report done, I'm now prepared to do it. I'm not working on the report thinking about my taxes or getting the diapers or getting the bananas or whatever it may be. I'm here now in the moment. That's what meditating teaches you. Being here now in the moment. Quiet, joyful, peaceful. When you're there and you get your mind trained to do that, that isn't just like something you do for 15 minutes a day just to give you something to do for that 15 minutes. That carries over into everything that you do.
The first is that force always creates a counterforce. Force creates a counterforce, whereas power is always creates grace. Grace and power, over and over again, he reports the research that power is something that will bring grace, that will bring God, will bring consciousness to the presence of it, whereas force always creates a counterforce. So that when you have a force, that is, if you react with shame, if you try to make your children feel ashamed, what are they going to do back? They resent, and what are they going to try to do to you? Some way of making you feel ashamed as well. It happens every time. You just have to watch it. You try to shame them and watch if they don't try to shame you. You said I couldn't do that, and you have to be punished for that. But you did that. You said this right away. Shame creates more shame. You've created a lowered energy field. They're weakened, you're weakened, and it works not just with shame, but with fear, with anxiety, with anger. Every time we use any of these, a counterforce is created. The second quality is that force is always loud, aggressive, whereas power is silent. That you raise energy levels through silence. And there's very little movement required when you are empowering. Whereas when you get louder, screaming, aggressive, more outgoing, and so on. The third is that force is always moving against something. That's what force is. So whatever it is that you have, we have to move against it. We have to mobilize our forces and defeat it. Whereas power does not move at all. The fourth thing is that force is always incomplete. Therefore, it must be fed energy. You must constantly feed energy of force. You must constantly be talking to it. You must constantly be upgrading it. You must constantly be trying to make it attract more energy. It's always demanding of energy. Whereas power is total and complete, requires nothing from outside itself. Power does not demand anything out there, not any weapons. It doesn't need any arguments to win. Power is that which you are connected to silently. The fifth, force always makes demands. Whenever you are in force, and if you look at any of those emotions and energy levels below 200, you will see that there's a demand to each one of them. Whereas power has no needs whatsoever. It is at peace. The sixth is force is constantly consuming. It has insatiable appetite. It is constantly demanding more. And in the process, it consumes, and in the process of consuming, it destroys. Power is always content, makes no demands, and needs nothing to consume. 7, force always takes energy away. It takes your energy and takes it with it. Whereas power energizes. It gives forth. It supplies and supports. And it gives life energy. When you go to God, when you go to Spirit, when you go above 200 to any of those levels, what you are doing is you are energizing those around you and sending it out. Whereas when you're in any of the ones below 200, you are taking energy away. The 8th is that force is always associated with judgment and generally makes us feel badly about ourselves. Any of those emotions, any of those thoughts have to do with judging, and ultimately when you experience those thoughts or you're in the presence of someone who is using those thoughts, you will end up feeling badly or worse for the experience. Whereas power is associated with compassion, radical humility, and always makes us feel positive about ourselves. When you encounter someone whose thoughts are above 200, after that encounter, you will feel better for having been in their presence, based upon not just what you talk about, but even the feelings that you have. Whereas when you're associated with or around people who are using the techniques below 200, you feel yourself feeling badly, worse, and depleted of energy. Number 9, force always polarizes because it demands conflict in order to survive. Force and conflict go together. Power, the energy of power above 200 will unify and make you feel more like you belong, a sense of belonging. Number 10, I just put it this way, in force, the cost is always very high because enemies are always being created. Force needs an enemy. It costs to stay in a state of force. Whereas power has no cost whatsoever. It's absolutely free. It's graceful, it's silent, it's easy, it's non-consuming, it makes no demands. The 11th, and I've always been intrigued by this, the 11th quality or characteristic of force, force always requires proof because it's literal and it's therefore arguable. Whereas power deals with intangibles, and it knows that health is better than disease. It doesn't need any proof of that. It knows that honor is better than dishonor. It knows that faith is better than doubt, and that being constructive is better than destructive. And you don't need a chi-square, and you don't need an analysis of variance, and you don't need a statistical test to be able to prove it, and you don't need to argue about it. There's an awareness that is internal, that is instinctive, that says, I don't have to go out there and show anything. It's why it's quiet. I know it is better to be honorable than it is to be dishonorable. I know it is better to be honest than to steal. I don't need proof of that. I know that it is better to be healthy than to be in a state of disease. I know that life is better than death. I know this. I don't have to prove it. I don't have to explain it. I live in a consciousness of empowerment in which I don't have to go through and look outside of myself to validate whether these things that I know instinctively and intuitively are correct.
When we take this power of this invisible part of us, it's so hard to define this. We call it a belief, or you call it a thought, or you call it your soul, or your spirit, or whatever. But that invisible part of you that really determines everything about your life. And you begin to say to yourself, all right, how can I apply the awareness of these thoughts and how I use my mind to make my life all that I want it to be, to bring into my life the things that are important to me, to improve the quality of my relationships, to have the success and so on that I think that I'm entitled to. And it's really getting to the point where you know that every thought that you have has a potential for coming into your life, for coming into form. You start to get real cautious about having anything in your mind that isn't going to work for you, and question why you would keep any of those thoughts in you. I can remember one story of a woman who came to me one time and told me how miserable she was, that she was married to a drunk. And I said, well, what's wrong? And she said, well, he slurs his words, and he repeats himself, and he smells bad, and it's just awful to be around him. And I said, let's see if I understand. Let's see who's crazy in this little scenario you've just described. Now, you said you've married to a drunk, and the drunk slurs his words, and he repeats himself, and he smells bad, and he sounds foolish. I said, that's every drunk I've ever known does exactly that. We got a drunk who's acting and doing everything that you would expect a drunk to do. Now we got you, and you're married to someone that you call a drunk, and you're expecting him to be sober. You know, now who's crazy? The drunk who's doing what he's supposed to, or you who's expecting someone who is what you've defined him to be something different than what they are? He is what he is. And why would you want to entertain, why would you want to keep thoughts in your mind that are making you miserable, which is going to expand misery for you in your life by just having those thoughts? Why not change around those thoughts and tell yourself that you're, like, if you argue for your misery, then the only thing you're going to get is your misery. You have to get that, and you're arguing for it all the time. You're going around talking about how miserable you are. So you want to get real careful about that. And I suggest to every one of you that whatever it is you find yourself incapable of doing, or whatever you found that has been a great obstacle, or whatever it is that's in a relationship that isn't working, that you just can't seem to transcend, or whatever's going on with a particular employee or a way that you're approaching anything in your business, that if you examine, just for a moment, if you examine what belief is it that supports this behavior, because the ancestor to every action is a belief, is a thought, and then work at re-examining that. I mean, I've done that so many times in my own life, and things that don't seem like they're that important to other people. Like, my wife doesn't understand why certain things about my tennis game that I play every day that I've really challenged. I mean, I grew up with the belief that I couldn't hit a backhand. And it was for 10 years I told myself that I don't have a backhand, I can't hit a backhand. And then I began to change that belief around. And it wasn't that I just, practice. I began to visualize myself doing all the things that it takes to make a backhand work for myself. I began to do that with a serve. I began to do that with a drop shot. Instead of telling myself, I can't hit a drop shot, and then acting out on that, and a whole match will go by, and a whole year will go by, and I'll never hit a drop shot, or I'll never hit a lob, or I'll never try a spin serve, or whatever. If you keep telling yourself that you can't do something, you act on that belief, and whether it's just a silly little thing like improving your tennis game, which isn't so silly if you're making your living off of it, or if you're coaching it, or any other skill area, or anything in your life, change around the thought, as you think, so shall you be.